to our annual panel discussion with the county executives. I'm Jonathan Drapkin, the President and CEO of Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. I thank you for joining us virtually this morning as we all find ways to continue what we do in these challenging times. When we originally were thinking about the theme for this year's event, we wanted to look ahead to the start of a new decade. Little did we know that the time horizon would change to the days and weeks ahead as we navigate our way through a pandemic and economic crisis, the likes of which none of us have ever encountered. Joining us this morning are County Executives Marcus Molinaro from Dutchess County, County Executive Steve Neuhaus from Orange County, and County Executive Pat Ryan from Ulster County. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
I thought I'd just start with, this thing is affecting all of us on a personal level, and I thought I would just start with the human side of this. And Marcus, I'd like to start with you, and maybe you could talk a little bit about how this has impacted you.
Well, first, thanks for making this work for us. And, I do want to say up front, the coordination we've had with our colleagues, the three counties have been functioning as really a team on issues, just consulting one another, consoling one another, and coordinating with one another. Listen, I'll say up front, the breadth and the impact of this disease is obviously global, but we've seen it in our communities. We've seen families struggle. We know people who have been hospitalized. I will tell you that it did not hit me personally until 2 weeks ago. I think you're aware. My father, my biological father, was symptomatic. It hit him very, very quickly. I can tell you that our observation of the disease, because we don't have immunity, is that it sort of attacks your weaknesses. He went into Westchester Medical with severe symptoms, was put on a ventilator very, very quickly, and as you know, spent now almost 2 weeks at Westchester Medical. He lost his battle with the disease last Friday, and I can only offer to you that we've talked about this sort of secondhand in a sense. But the caregivers, the doctors, the hospital, the amount of empathy and the amount of compassion that they have to pour into caring for the patient, but also emoting to family since we couldn't be there, and emoting from family to the patient, in this case, my dad, it's just a remarkable and sort of superhuman, effort. It's the attributes, the characteristics, the traits that they have to summon in order to make that happen for us is just remarkable. This is a real disease, and it is taking real people's lives. And I know that there are families certainly worse off and challenge greater than mine. So this hit home. I lost a very special man. But then again, there are thousands of people who have lost their lives, and for us, I think it's important to remember that this is the work that we do is about caring for other people, whether it's through policy or action. But it is at the end of the day trying to care for other people.
Marcus, thank you for sharing both the personal side of this, and let me just turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, good morning, and Jonathan, thanks for letting us have this, and thanks for saving me on the 2-hour commute I used to make over to Marc. Marc would usually call me on my way over, and he'd be like, "I'm not even out of bed yet. We got 15 minutes though," and I would still beat him to your breakfast, which was in Dutchess County. But we are very close, Pat, Marc, and I, and we obviously extend our prayers to Marc's family, and he's had to deal with that personally, the worst out of the three of us. But Pat and Marc and I speak on a regular basis every day, whether it's phone call, text, what's going on, what are you doing? And I think it's made it a lot easier for me personally as a county executive to get through that, to be able to bounce that off my two colleagues. So we've been close there. I kind of feel like, and I compare this, I feel like I'm still in Iraq, where I would work 7 hours a day, maybe 12 hours, maybe more. This doesn't stop 9 to 5 for Marc and Pat and I. We're getting calls and text messages. We usually have a 7 p.m. county execs phone call where we get updates from around the state. It is, as we navigate through this, we weren't sure how this is going to turn out. Should we be closing schools? Should we not? New York City wasn't. Are we being too aggressive? Hey, are you being too forward leaning? And now we've all seen that we've been on the right track on this by working together on this. But, you're seeing real things happening here, Jonathan. I had 20 people to report that died here yesterday. One of the people that worked in my office, her mom died in a nursing home. And, we're talking to these people personally as county executives. I have senior staff that are in serious condition right now, physically, and talking to their spouses, how are we going to make it through there? So there's a number of people and a number of jobs that we have to do as county executives that we've never had to do before, making sure that our Office of the Aging is providing food for anybody, regardless of how old you are, regardless if you are a veteran, regardless of anything. So I'm ordering body bags as county executive. We're ordering coffins if we need to. I mean, this is the crazy stuff that you never think of, but I cannot think of 3 individuals, as well as our other colleagues. I talked to the Albany County Executive. I talked to the Sullivan County Manager that are more prepared than county executives, because that's our job. It's operational. It's not a dig at legislative branch. They have their role and we need them. But the 3 county executives and our colleagues are working together on this. And I think we're doing a good job. But it is a very uncharted territory.
So, Pat, I want to send it over to you, but also I think Steve gave the perfect segue to also say to the 3 of you that with Steve's experience in Iraq and other places, Pat, your military experience, and Marcus, from the days when you were a mayor, every inch of your county and how to deliver services, and probably know half the people by name, if not more. But Pat, let's give you a chance to talk a little bit about how this has affected you personally, and maybe a little bit how your military background has put you in, good shape to try to deal with this.
And again, thanks for making this work, everybody. I'm only about 9 months into this job, unlike the other 2 gentlemen on the line who've had more experience. So I have been blessed to be able to rely on them and seek their advice, and just in some cases their comfort, as Steve said. And I just want to quickly say again, Marc, we're sending all of our love, my wife Rebecca and I, and our family, to yours. So I can't imagine how hard that is. And we've had many fatalities in our county as well. That's been the hardest part for me. As I was an Army officer, I deployed twice to Iraq. I had to witness some of my soldiers and lose their lives and to console their families. I never thought I'd have to do that as a county executive. And so that's just gut wrenching. But on a lighter note, a few of the other unexpected personal impacts. So a weekend ago, my wife gave me my first COVID haircut, and it's actually not too bad. So that's something that I think a lot of us are unexpectedly.
It's my son that shaves my head.
Yeah. So, I think probably the hardest moment for me, which pales in comparison to Marc's, was my grandmother turned 89. She's in a nursing home. She has asthma. And all we wanted to do was just be able to be with her and celebrate her birthday in this crazy time. And we couldn't even see her. We couldn't figure out FaceTime or Zoom or anything at that point. And so I know there are hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people dealing with those kinds of moments, and just reminding of us of our humanity. And I think that's the best we can do trying to get through this.
So, Steve, let me take you back about what seems like months ago, but was probably about 4 weeks ago. What were the early challenges? How did you have to restructure the delivery of services as this thing was unfolding on a daily basis?
We have, most of our workforce working from home now. So we had to do some emergency purchase orders to make sure we had enough laptops, everybody ready to go. I have a very forward-leaning health commissioner. She's young, she's aggressive, and so some of the counties, even south of us and north of us, were like, holy, Steve, you're really getting out there, closing schools, closing this. And thankfully, it ended up working out to being the right decisions. And that's really ultimately what our job is to take information in and make decisions. And I have deemed some of my staff the Rainbow Squad. I got 4 individuals that are, constantly like, we need to order this, we need to have that. And I need to make the decision of what we really need. And I have to own that. So we are constantly doing that, even now, 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later. And we had to reassign. I have to tell you, other counties, I'm not going to speak for Dutchess or Ulster, but counties north of me are having massive grievances between their workforce. Not my work title. I'm not doing it. I'm not having those problems. I have a couple here, but they've been worked out. But I retrained my entire DMV. Annie Rabbit, the clerk, took her DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles staff, and they are now below me in this building right now as call takers for our 311 and healthcare and things like that, helping out in those areas. So that transition has worked out. And I have to tell you, the first couple weeks, I've been the tyrant. I'm pretty tough. I hate to say it, and I'll admit it. And Mary Pat will tell you, I'm a pretty tough boss when I have to be. I don't want to be mean. I'm just firm. I need things. And one of the things we do, I think I have it here, is I need every day. And behind me is a board that says facts only. And one of the biggest problems we have as county executive, what is fact and what is fiction? Hey, we're hearing that we're short on ventilators. They're disconnecting people at this hospital. Well, is it true, or did you hear that? So you constantly throughout the day, but I do a 1-page summary. Pat Ryan is familiar with this. We have this, it's commander's update brief in the military. Where you are, you see colors, green, yellow, shows you are with supply. So those type of things, and getting that now streamlined and getting us in a sweet spot is where I am today. But it's taken a lot of work throughout my department staff, from the lowest to the highest, you name it. And that's where we are today.
Marcus, I mean, you've been up and running as county executive, but how did you have to adapt to this?
I said this to Pat early on. He was kind enough to offer a similar compliment, but I think Steve and Pat's background in the military prepared them to sort of, immediately sort of transition to the way in which government needs to function in this pandemic. I think that, and Pat was kind of referenced it, but I've spent every day in government, so getting our government officials understanding that this is a new normal and how to act in it was somewhat seamless. I mean, I have to tell you, very early on, we were able to flip that switch from the sort of the broad responsibilities of county government to those that are essential, and then getting people to work in them. I do think communicating, certainly, we all know this, communicating with the public and providing fact and data and answering questions, and also acknowledging when we don't have an answer. It is not comforting to have someone stand behind a podium and sort of make it up as they go along. If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you, we get back to you. That, I think, is important for the public. But it was equally important for employees to hear from us. So we do a regular conference call with the entire county staff, whether they're home or essential, saying to them where we are. As Steve referenced, we sort of transitioned into a bit of a military operation, or at least what I envisioned a military operation would be. I mean, my chief of staff has Army background, but we do a daily situation report, a daily situation update. That is we established a series of work groups that have very specific tasks. They're color-coded. Everyone knows the category they fit in. And then action items. So it's situational awareness. It is action items for that day. And it is distilling fact from fiction. And we do that every day. But that regular communication, I think, is proven exceptionally important. The challenge, I think, for all of us is, one, getting our team to understand that this is a new paradigm. And the things we used to do, we're certainly not going to do in the midst of this emergency. And how we do them as we sort of claw our way out is going to be different as well. But also the demand to explain to the public how what we do is different, and how what they need to do is different. And I think the governor has been exceptionally good at this, explaining that we are sort of all in this emergency together, and we all have a role, we all have a task. We're all a soldier with a different responsibility, and some of the soldiers have to stay home. That's all we need you to do, stay home. So getting that, making sure the public transition, making sure staff understood that transition was I would say, a challenge. But I would also, from our perspective, we have a mature team, right? We've been at this now for 8 years. They were able to make that transition fairly easily, and we focused on what is essential and how we would provide that in the most caring and compassionate way. And I think all of that has made the reaction a little bit easier. And you'll see it in our data. I mean, Steve obviously has some very specific concerns that created a community transmission that we saw in Orange County. But if you look at we 3 counties, I think our early action, I think our consistent and factual messaging, and our structures internally have really resulted in the community paying attention. The last thing I'll say, and I'll stop on this, is that I think what we've learned, and the public I think is learning, county governments in many ways I've referred to us as sort of like we're like the water pipes. If they're working, you don't pay much attention to them, but when they're not, you know it. And county government has kept the pipes fixed. We've been moving the water, we've been moving the product, we've been moving the message, we've been moving the aid in a way that the public, I think, relies on us. And as they're sitting home now in big numbers and working with us to slow this spread, I think they recognize the value of this level of government. And I would offer the importance of counties working together to provide that sort of consistency and that confidence that people need from us.
I think you're absolutely right to say that during this period, the notion of how people interact with government and their feelings towards government, all of a sudden, they said, wait a minute, we need government to be able to help us understand what we need to do next. Yes,
let me offer this before you jump to Pat, but I want to reiterate, that doesn't mean you can make it up. No matter who you are, whether you're a village mayor, as I once was, a county executive, a governor, or a president, we cannot afford to have it sort of, you can't wing it. So if we don't know an answer, we say we don't know the answer. And I think that is exceptionally valuable because the public wants to trust us in this moment. It is not the time to take advantage of that.
Thank you. Pat?
You
had it. Not only did you have to do this, but you had to set up a government.
Yeah, well, when you're busy, you make time. But I think that building on what both Steve and Marc said is exactly right. And if there's one of the big takeaways I think we'll have with some historical perspective, it's that not just that government matters, but that local government really matters, especially when, frankly, early on, there was at least a sense of some lack of leadership, or I would say a leadership vacuum. I mean, one of the wake-up moments for me that speaks to your question of how we had to reconfigure, 4 or 5 days after our first case, I held we figured out the technology to do this telephone town hall. And we had over 10,000 people call in to this call because it was very clear to me that they weren't getting information, or at least information that they felt was factual and unbiased and just the straight truth, no BS. And that was a real wake-up moment for me that, man, not only do we need to totally reconfigure government, not only do we need to figure out how to build 2 mobile testing sites, which we've never done before, to build a surge community care center for medical overflow, or figure out should we close schools or not, all those things. But we also need to be communicating in a way and filling a vacuum. And I think particularly all 3 of us have done a pretty good, given the situation, a pretty good job of that. And I think that really, really matters for people to feel that they're just getting the information. And definitely Governor Cuomo's done the same thing. But I would just say that if we come away from this realizing that a lot of things that we do to keep those pipes going in local government are really critical, and that as we step away from this, whether it's government or even local economies, one of the big takeaways to me is we need to rebuild the sense of being of local and community, and make sure that we build resilient structures in our economy, in our government, in our schools, so that we're not so brittle in the wake of these kinds of catastrophic, unexpected events.
You could watch all the CNN and Fox you want, but you won't find out what's happening in Ellenville, Rhinebeck, Walden. It's critical, the connection to the county level and then the local government. Pat, let me stay with you. What's the best story of an organization or an individual that has touched you as a symbol of the best we can be?
Yeah, this is the other big takeaway. We've had so many powerful moments of our community rallying here. We had this really sea of goodwill of people calling and saying, "I want to help. I want to volunteer. I want to give. I want to donate food. I want to make masks. I want to make face shields. I want to give money." And so we started a project about a weekend called Project Resilience, which was really designed to not do all this, but to try to bring it together, coordinate it, distribute it. And in a few weeks, for example, we've delivered over 30,000 meals across the county to people that have raised their hand and say, we have need. And I wish I could have the time to tell you some of the individual human stories. The one that sticks in my mind, someone posted, one of our volunteers who I don't even know, we have hundreds of volunteers around the county doing this every day on their own. One of them posted a picture on Facebook of this note that they got left on the door when someone came to bring them a meal. And it said, "We are 85 and 91 years old. We are homebound and this is our only lifeline. Thank you so much." And it had this little smiley face at the bottom of the note. And maybe I was having a rough day, but I mean, that was, I kind of lost it a little bit just because I think that was such a powerful, small but powerful moment of recognizing that a lot of the solution to many of the challenges we have is right in front of us. It's our community. It's the sense of goodwill that we inherently have, and that sometimes it requires leaders to remind people that in a bad time you could go one direction and sort of feel panic or division, but to me, leadership is about bringing people together in those tough moments, and I think everybody here has been doing that, and I'm just really, really proud of our county and our whole region.
Steve, is there one moment or organization or something that stood out for you that, you said, wow, if they can do that, I can certainly stick to this for another day?
I'm kind of like Pat on this. I worked in Tower 2 of the World Trade Center in 2001. So I saw how the country came together, all different people, different backgrounds. And one of the jobs we have where Marc's talking about us being like the water pipe and getting things done is we don't know. A lot of people I know in my county have not gotten an unemployment check, Jonathan. They're waiting. They're backlog. And I don't beat up the state or federal government. I've been trying to be non-political throughout this whole crisis. And so the one thing we can do is try to provide food for people. We have a single mom at home. She's got to stay home with her kids. So we have seen the traditional programs collapse, whether they be faith-based, maybe Meals on Wheels, because many of those operations were run by senior citizens or they just can't keep up with the workload. So we've depended on, like Pat mentioned, on volunteers. So we have people that are elderly volunteering. We have people, maybe they're trying to get their kids out of the house because they've had it because it's been a month. But I would not be able to meet those goals and those obligations of delivering now thousands of meals. The school districts, I've never seen a closer relationship. And I'm a former town supervisor, between my local mayors and supervisors, Democrat and Republican, and every school district. None of them are a pain in my neck. I like them. We are helping each other. We have a call every day that they can ask questions on. So we would not be successful. I was on the phone with Joe DiStefano this morning. His soup kitchen needs some help with stuff. So those traditional volunteers, in Time Magazine a few years ago, their man of the year was the American soldier, not some famous admiral or some general or some movie celebrity, but it was the average man and woman that's in the trenches that are helping getting things done. So going back to what my colleague Pat said, our job is easier as county executives because of the many volunteers that have stepped up, whether they are from a religious organization or by themselves. They help us meet our goals.
Thanks, Steve. Marcus?
Yeah, it would be wrong, I think, of any of us to sort of point to a single achievement of any one group. It's just what is so profoundly clear is the true sense of humanity and decency and charity that has always existed, but seems to have found entirely new ways to manifest itself and to be real in the lives of the people that we serve. I mean, to Steve's point, to Pat's point, all elected officials seem willing to work together to most of the degree. But the truth is, we also have a sense of purpose, and we know that, as my wife would remind me just about every day since this began, every so often, you, Marc, are essential. So, point being that the government leaders have focus, and that's held us together. The public, despite the challenges of accessing unemployment or SBA loans, and believe me, that has just been an overwhelming challenge. Not having money coming in, you still see businesses donating, college campuses opening up to provide assistance, charitable and not-for-profit organizations trying to find new ways to provide help, whether it's sewing masks or just simply providing transportation for food. Like Ulster, we launched Dutchess Responds. We've had hundreds of people come forward to volunteer to deliver meals, to deliver prescription drugs, to coordinate with our food pantries. We've seen volunteers that just don't want to go home. They want to continue to cook, and they want to continue to organize. We opened a homeless shelter so that we could sort of bring folks with housing issues together and provide aid. We've had, our own mental health staff available, wanting to provide that mental wellness service to those folks in the shelter. I think without pointing to a single person or a single exercise or activity, I do want to reiterate that it is the sense of decency and camaraderie and community that has reemerged. And I think too often over the last several years, we've kind of forgotten that it's probably always existed. It's sad that we needed, this challenge for it to emerge in such a clear and nonpartisan. And I say that in every variation of that definition, a nonpartisan way. People have, they just want to come forward to help. And it's a reminder, I think, that yes, in an emergency, our first responders are the ones that we rely on and we cherish, and they provide a valuable role. In this emergency, they are met by other first responders, whether they're grocery store clerks or volunteers, whomever they are, nurses who have just retired coming forward to staff an alternate care facility. They are acting in heroic ways, and that I think is just, it's heartwarming, it's essential, and it's a reminder that certainly at this level of life where we live in this region, there's this fabric that kind of holds us together, and it is strong. And to use Pat's phrase, it is resilient, and we are resilient, and that is emerging in every way possible. And I think that is just a brilliant and wonderful thing to see.
So I wanted to ask you, and we'll start with you, Marcus, like, even at this early stage, you talk about the resiliency of people emerging. Are there other things that might change us? What are we learning that might actually leave us in a better place?
I hope things are changing. I mean, I hope that what we are learning is the need to metaphorically or physically lean on one another when we can do it again. And I can say this, certainly from my own personal experience, but from what we witness in our community every day, the need to really reconnect with family and friends and cherish those relationships. But I think, as we've all said, I think what we've learned also is that we have to deliver services in a new way. We have to be more aware of those who struggle the hardest, because in moments like this, they are disproportionately hurt and challenged. And I think that the value of effective and competent and honest government is very, very clear. And that we have to sort of engage in this reawakening or revitalization of sort of, the government's responsibility to be good and decent stewards and caretakers. And that we have to do more to communicate that with the public, and that we have to be open to the public communicating with us and kind of reevaluating how we respond. So I guess I'm hopeful that the reawakening or the reemergence of our decency and humanity is something that will carry us past this. The demand and need to make sure governments have the right tools and resources to respond in moments like this. I think we've learned that as well, and they need to be honest with one another and sort of be clear. I'm thankful that we have social media and tools to communicate in some ways, but I think we also recognize that to some degree, how we've communicated these last several years has at times been divorced from compassion and at times facts. And hopefully all of that is sort of reemerging as important, and that our layer of government is exceptionally relevant in responding to both emergency and ordinary issues facing our communities.
Thanks, Marcus. Steve, anything that you see early emerging as something that you may want to adopt as a way to deliver government services?
Well, besides what Marc said, talking about how it's changing us as individuals, we also need to see how we're going to, when we get out of here, how we're going to reemerge. And one of the crises that we are facing, everybody, in New York City, the whole country, is a decline in what was anticipated as revenues, sales tax. Right. My Woodbury Commons, one of the golden eggs here in Orange County, as they used to call it, has been closed. Small businesses they say 2 out of 5 will likely not come back. So that will, I'm going to have to reshape Orange County government, and we are already on shoestrings. We are very tight. So as you know that, Jonathan, we've been having these conversations throughout the years. So we're going to have to look at not only how Orange County functions, but how our contracts with our private nonprofits. And as they say, every action has a reaction. So if I, let's say, gave the cooperative extension, I think, have the biggest share of any county in the state, $1.something million. If we cut them from 20%, is it going to force them to lay off people or cut services? So those are the type of things that now we've talked about during the budget with the legislature, but nobody wanted to cut some of these difficult things. Now the rubber's going to hit the road. Education is also a big change here now. I'm not sure if it's going to be worse for kids. Parents now, luckily, my wife's able to be home with my children. And every morning I hear them all struggling, trying to get online, trying to answer questions. But there are a lot of creative things coming out of this. Art teachers that are home, not even from the school district, doing a half-hour art class, or a restaurant that's closed doing a half-hour baking or cooking class, going back to those basic skills. So those are the type of things that I think are going to change us. But the behavior of people, where have you been getting your groceries lately now? Many people are ordering it online.
Right.
I've been buying, I'm the most old school guy in the world. I like to physically shop. I've always prided myself as the only guy that likes to physically go to the store. But I've been buying stuff online now. Is that going to change how people behave after this? You turn a green light on tomorrow, the Woodbury Commons and regular stores are down to 20% employees because they don't know who's going to be coming into those doors. What is the shopper's sense of comfort going to be? So I think that this is going to be unnavigated seas, and we're going to have to trial and error our way through this. But we are going through this on a regular basis, talking with economic development, the guys and gals that are in business right now. We say to them, okay, who are your top 4 competitors? If 1 or 2 of your top 4 competitors go away tomorrow, how are you going to seize upon getting their customers to become your customers? Are you starting to do that? So these are the multifaceted, all over the place type of things that we as county executives are doing. And I will tell you, Pat and Marc and I bounce these ideas off each other daily.
Pat, I know you came in with a playbook, and I don't know what you did with it, but has it affected it all, or have you even had a moment to reflect upon your priorities of what you wanted to do as a new county executive?
I think we have to. I've forced myself to do that because it's easy to get in the crisis and lose the forest through the trees. So we need to, that's the other piece here. We have to manage the crisis. We have to manage a public health response. We have to manage sort of the second and third phases of economic recovery and socioeconomic recovery. and we need to have some vision that, to your question, Jonathan, brings us out of this actually better. And this is where I think going back to the playbook that I came in with is what I hope to do. And a lot of it builds on the work that Pattern has done. I think it's no one could have predicted, but the work you all did on this out of alignment report that talks about the fragility of our whole economy, particularly the fact, at least in Ulster County, prior to COVID-19, 4 out of 10 households were living paycheck to paycheck. So they're already hanging by a thread, and then you just get absolutely the gut punch of the initial crisis, and then continued really pummeling while you're already down on the ground between no income, rent piling up, costs piling up. You got to probably buy more food than you did before for many folks. So to me, the opportunity and the challenge coming out of this is, how do we build a more resilient, equitable economy at the local level? And to me, the answer is going kind of what's old is new again. We have to figure out how to what does a local economy really mean? I mean, no offense to Woodbury Commons. We all love to go to Woodbury Commons. That's not a local economy. Those are multinational companies that are paying near minimum or low wages to their workers. And that putting those people in that category of barely being able to survive even when they have a job. Yeah. I think we need to go back to, okay, how can we reinvent our region being the agricultural breadbasket of the state and of the city? You know, that could provide some good jobs. How do we create other green and clean energy jobs here? How do we build parts of our economy that will not put people in that category of barely hanging on? And that's going to be really hard, because to Steve's point, we're going to be faced with all these budget pressures and trade-off questions. But I think it'd be a big mistake to go back to business as usual coming out of this. We don't have all the answers figured out, but I think that's imperative that we use this as an opportunity to rethink what worked, what didn't. We will definitely be doing that here, and we want everybody's input in that, obviously.
You know, you referenced Pattern's out of alignment report. I think what we had in mind was that after the longest period of expansion, there had to be some contraction. We didn't expect this. Marcus, after 9/11, there was that initial bump of people, due to fear, probably more than anything else, of moving out of New York City and considering coming to the Hudson Valley. Do you think that is likely to occur again, this time fear and density being issues in New York City? And is that something we should be prepared for?
Well, if I were any good at predicting things, I'd have a different line of work. However, to sort of follow with Pat's comment to answer your question, I think there will be a desire to become local again. I think localism will kind of be a new reality. Steve, I enjoy doing some of my own grocery shopping as well, but I find myself now at the farmer's market, not the open farmer's market, but a farm shop or business, because one, I know where it came from. Two, it's less likely to be filled with people. And third, I know the money's staying locally. I do think that we will see that. But to your broader question, I think it's only logical that you're going to see people wanting to get out of, not in mass, but certainly I do think there will be a push into the Hudson Valley from obviously higher density populations, New York City. I just hope that it doesn't look the same way it did in the 1980s and 90s. You know, the suburbanization of our communities was not over time sustainable and created, in fact, over time a weaker sense of community. So the short answer to your sort of all of our looking out and into the future is that, yeah, I certainly do believe people will want to look for smaller community centers where they know, one, they feel a little bit safer, right? This density issue is confronted. But I do think that it will be matched by a desire to stay local, to have some connection to their neighbors and to their businesses, and that dollars that we spend stay more local. I sense that that's what you'll see. In particular, I think you'll see it from people of means leaving New York City or sort of densely populated communities. The other, though, is it will further that divide between those who have and those who have not. And I do think how we address that can't be one relegated to one county or community, and has to be more broadly addressed. There will be people who want to leave certain settings. They can't afford to. They don't have the resources to. They don't have job opportunities. We've got to make sure that whatever this new normal looks like, that we're bridging that divide as effectively as possible. So yeah, I do think there'll be some push outward. I do think it'll start with people who have means, which, by the way, is something that we have to confront. That those who live at the lower end of the income scale or the economy aren't left behind fending for themselves, and that, I think, is in full exposure now, but it's likely to become a bigger problem if that sort of redistribution of where people live becomes a reality. But I do think it'll be matched by localism. I think that there will be a real desire to remain or to create a connection that perhaps one didn't have before. I mean, I know people who live in New York City who've never met the neighbors in their same apartment building, that all have their doors open and they're talking more than 12 or 15 feet away. So point being that I think we'll see some of that transfer of population, but it'll be met by, I think, a desire to remain connected.
To your point, I think the last conversation you and I had was on housing.
Yeah.
And you were looking at the spectrum of housing and saying, I want to focus on affordable and homeless, because that was, I think, the priority of 3 months ago when you and I spoke about this.
And because I'll just say, I mean, every economist, and they're not any better at predicting anything either, but every economist suggests that, this very quick pitch downward in the global economy will be met by a steep incline, if you will, or return for the major corporations, the Wall Street businesses. That is not going to be the same, in my estimation. It will not be the same for the dry cleaner, the grocery store, and the local restaurant or not-for-profit. We are not going to see a steep and immediate return. Wall Street might do well, but that's good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with creating wealth that hopefully will gin up the economy. But the truth of the matter is, the challenge for the small local business, and thus the family that relies on them, is going to be real. And I think it's going to feel a lot more like the Great Depression than the response or the aftermath of 2008.
Steve, the notion of it, that post 9/11 bump, I mean, you've had police, firefighters from New York City living in great numbers in Orange County. Do you think there will be another wave of people moving up?
I definitely think there will. And if you look at the values, I think there'll be a return to localism, like Marc and Pat are saying. I remember as a little boy getting milk delivered to my house. Those days are returning again. I had
Steve Neuhaus.
I know. I actually had, Marc, I think you were elected long before Pat and I were. So,
yes, but I remain forever the teenager.
Yeah, but I had beer from a microbrewery delivered to my house last week. And if you look at the values, don't even look at Manhattan. Look at Brooklyn. What you can buy in Brooklyn, look what you can buy up here. And we see that. I did a radio show earlier today, going back to that localism. I raise honeybees. One of the police officers down the street from me does syrup. Another guy down the road has beef, and we trade. Hey, I'm running low on honey. Give me 2 jars of honey. I'll give you a couple packages of beef and sausage. The other guy gives me a thing of syrup. So you might not have everybody to have the ability to do that, but you're going to see a lot of localism. You're going to see, I believe, a great opportunity for the cities, Poughkeepsie, Kingston, my 3 cities in Orange County, where people can move up from the city or move here, have that urban sense, but also be able to buy, which we have a vast portfolio, I know in my 3 cities, of affordable, buyable properties that you could buy a whole block for what you pay in a year's rent in Brooklyn or New York City. And those jobs are changing. It's like Pat is saying, and some of the other people, you could go commute to the city 1 day a week or once every 2 weeks and do the rest of it from your home, which is a lot better, I think, for you as a person. You've seen it more productive in some avenues, but I think you're going to see a lot of small businesses as well as those larger ones like the Woodbury Commons, like the Legoland. Those are going to change themselves. But the small ones, the Orange County Chamber of Commerce, the ones that have 1 or 2 employees, you're going to see those change. And I think that it's going to be, I think we're going to get at it. So it's going to make us better. It's going to probably make us cleaner and greener. And I think that it's a great opportunity for us right now. We just need to make sure that when it comes, we're ready to receive it.
Pat, do you want to take that one, or I have another question for you?
I think we're all pretty aligned. I'll just say, it's a little cliche or maybe inappropriate, but, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Maybe a little too soon to say that, but I think there's tremendous opportunity here. And the way that I think we're all thinking about it is that it could also go wrong if we don't really put the right forethought into it and think about a sustainable, scalable way to do this that recognizes some of the previous inequalities in the system and how do we address those. But I'm very optimistic about what this is going to mean for our region. And frankly, again, back to your report, Jonathan, population has been declining and we need new energy and dynamism. We need people that want to build community, plug into a great community that already exists. And we absolutely are excited to welcome that and support that and really make it integrated.
So, Pat, let me stay with you a second. So the debate is on right now as to when is the right time to open the economy. And obviously, the debate is between the healthcare concerns that we don't do it too early. And any feeling on where to come out in that debate?
I think the smartest take I've heard on this, I'm neither a public health expert or an economist, is that the two are intimately intertwined, and that a rush to failure to move too quickly will actually create a much bigger economic hit. And as I've talked to local individual businesses here, small and large, and started to think with them, what would this look like? It's very easy to envision a scenario where, let's say, for example, hotel or tourist attraction opens too quickly and they're under tremendous pressure, particularly in that industry, to get revenue in the door, but they open too quickly, there is another health incident, and then it actually creates a whole nother second ripple effect in the economy of lack of confidence, which I think would be way more detrimental. So the way I see this going is things were kind of wound and tightened around the concept of reducing density and what's critical and essential versus not. And we need to kind of unwind carefully in the same way. There are certain things I think we could move more quickly on, and services and businesses that could do the essence of what they do in a safe way with little or no density that respects this idea of local commerce. Local businesses can operate online. We need to help them position for that, but they can compete. And if we help them compete with the bigger companies, we just need to resource that. So those are my initial thoughts. No, I think we want to do it together. That's all I'll say is I think the same way we've heard Governor Cuomo talk about doing this among the states in the region. I know Steve, Marc, and I are committed to doing this together in our Hudson Valley region with anybody else, of course, who wants to participate. I think that's critical.
I'm also, we're all together on this. I'm also coy about when to do it too soon. I've probably been the most aggressive county executive in the state. I've been getting a lot of criticism. I'm keeping construction sites open because everybody that's out of work is now going to need help from me or need some type of assistance. So we're trying to do as best we can. But I will tell you, I'm seeing numbers still grow here in Orange County. I'm seeing my morgue is almost filled up, Jonathan. This is the conversations that Marc and Pat and I have that the public doesn't see. Crises within all our nursing homes, our hospitals, emergency responders in serious condition on ventilators. So we are having those conversations about how we can turn the spigot on slowly in different areas that won't have that negative backlash to get us back to where we are. But right now, I'm fighting for PPE. I don't blame the president. I don't blame the governor that, back in November, if they said we need to order more of these, I don't know, they would have probably got laughed at. But I will tell you, there is a legitimate shortage of these things. And there is a very easy situation where you can get overwhelmed. And a lot of us feel that we're plugging our hand into holes in the dam because, there are situations that happen. Politicians that aren't in the know, like these three guys, are operational. Legislators, they'll never be taking people off ventilators. Let me tell you, Jonathan, they've taken people off ventilators. That's a fact. And that's a sad fact. And that's a tough decision for a hospital to have to make. And our job as the county executives is to make sure that we keep this operational. So right now, I'm still seeing major increases every week. It's gotten, I don't know how you say it's gotten better. Maybe say it's gotten flattener, but over half of my hospital beds are still filled with COVID-19 related people. And I need to make sure, and there's a major burn rate, not only in PPE, but in people, nurses, doctors that are our heroes. And we've, went back to it. So I do think that we will get back to normal, but that I don't know how that business normal and how you turn that off without making sure that you're not making a mess again. And there's going to be that fear factor of going back to a restaurant or going to a supermarket. That's why Legoland didn't open. They could have had this thing done, let's say, in the middle of the summertime, but who wants to go to a park right now? I'm scared. I got little kids at home, but who are you going to interact with later on, your senior citizens? And I will tell you, Jonathan, there was a misconception about younger people not getting this. And Marc, I think, had one of the youngest ones right off the bat. When we first had our deaths, he had somebody in their 20s, I believe. And we were like, oh, my God, people are seeing on TV this is only for elderly or people with pre-existing conditions. That's not the case. So I do see it coming back, but it's going to be a concerted effort. Hopefully within the three of us, we might get overruled by the governor, as we've had in many situations here, which is not a problem. He's got a job to do. And like Marc said, there's not criticism there. But it is right now, I feel like we're in the middle of a storm. I'm trying to see how we're going to be after we get through it. But right now, we're facing some serious situations right here in my county, and I think my colleagues are as well.
I think before I turn it over to Marcus for his opinion, I think that if it started, for us in New York and Westchester, then went down into New York City, but then we saw it progress into Long Island, and I think it is progressing its way up into the Hudson Valley and parts of upstate New York. But Marcus, any sense on how to balance the health concerns with the economic concerns?
Yeah, let me, without trying to, I wouldn't correct you, Jonathan, but I would want to reiterate this point, and that is that when we saw the cases erupt in Westchester, and they did, they started moving in both directions at the same pace. It's just the Hudson Valley communities being less densely populated. The rate of community transmission was not as great or aggravated as it became further south of us. But and this, by the way, is one of the reasons I think the three counties, Ulster, Orange, and Dutchess, did move to close schools very early. And that was because we recognized, just as Ohio did, that even with 5 or 6 cases of confirmed positive cases, we knew that hundreds more had already contracted COVID. And so, to Steve's point, I think it's important. It's nice to have a conversation about when we return to whatever that new normal looks like, but we aren't there yet. We are not, yes, we're organizing for that. Yes, we are preparing for that. Yes, we're going to unwind. And I think Pat's analogy is good. It's sort of, we tightly wound this thing up. We're going to have to unwind it layer at a time, but we're not there yet. And so even though the rate of growth is slowing in positive cases, and yes, I will say in my county, thankfully, hospitalizations are relatively flat, but that can turn sideways in a minute. And so we need people to remain steadfast, as burdensome and challenging as this is. We need you to stay home. We need you to not push on that. Am I essential or not? It is not the time to hang out at parks. It is not the time to go on a hike with groups of people. It just isn't. And if we stick to that, the apex that we all we have new language that we all understand now, but the apex will be sooner. The height will be flatter. but the return to a new normal. I do not believe we were returning to normal. I don't know what normal is, but we will return to a new normal. Will approach us faster. But I will say this, to very specifically your question, right? The governor is actually, I think he said his analogy didn't make any sense to anybody but him, but it made sense to me. There are several cogs in this wheel. There are gears that need to function and rely on one another: education, public health, and economy. You can't start one without starting another in different ways. And if you know anything about that kind of mechanics, right? Just because one's moving faster than it doesn't mean they're all moving at the same speed. Some will be slower, and some will be slower, depending on their place in that in that mechanism. So to use that analogy, if we start turning the economy on, it's got to be matched by how do we support childcare or education, and then what does that look like for education and public health? This is what I believe. I believe that we are still weeks away from incremental return. I think the new normal will be clearly different than it was before. And I would just offer, certainly from government's perspective, I think our new normal and our return to some normalcy will continue for the duration of 2020. If you think that somehow we're going to flip a switch in August or even sooner and not have to make consequential decisions for gathering size and perhaps the reemergence of the illness or pockets of people that suddenly came from overseas and because they traveled, that's not going to reemerge, then you're wrong. We are going to be, I think, living through this incremental return throughout the duration of 2020, and that's going to really have an impact on everybody. But that is something I think we need to grapple with and be aware of if we're going to have any sanity throughout this. And again, I'll quote, I'll use them again. I mean, the governor said it. If you wake up today thinking, well, when do we get to flip the switch? What date is that? You're just going to end up disappointing yourself. I mean, it is going to be a slow and steady, maybe not even steady, a slow return to a new normal that I think extends through the duration of the year. I will say to what Pat said, what we've agreed, the three counties, is that we want to inform the governor and the states, this coalition of states decision making. But we also, as three counties, want to deal with the granular decision making somewhat together, so that if we're reactivating certain components of the economy, or there's certain sort of governmental responsibilities that we need to focus on, that we kind of at least create some uniformity. That Hudson River doesn't divide us, certainly, and there's no wall between us and the community south of us. So we all have to be working together. So you will see Ulster, Orange, and Dutchess, and perhaps those others that want to participate, making those granular decisions collectively, somewhat uniformly, but also using this as a mechanism to inform the governor and by the way, implement states' decision making in a regional way.
Yes, and as always, I offer our services to the three of you and anyone else to help try to figure this out on a coordinated basis. We're almost out of time, so is there anything else anyone wants to, offer at this point? Did we miss anything? Any closing statement, remark?
I'll just say at a high level, I think everybody watching should be immensely proud of how our governments have stepped up, how our community groups, religious groups, and how at the individual level our communities responded. I mean, you look at other stories around the country, there are lines, hundreds, thousands of cars long for food banks, yet we've figured out largely, not perfectly, but largely how to get a lot of food to people in a pretty quick amount of manner, and many other things. So to end on an optimistic note, I'm just really proud of how we've all stepped up, and there's more to come, but I think we should take a moment to appreciate that.
Thank you, Pat.
Jonathan, if I could, just to reiterate
Sure.
Where I started, and that just is, listen, there are some really weighty decisions that still need to be made. There are far too many people who are struggling economically, and that devastation is going to be real for some time. We all recognize that. In these moments, however, I do hope, and I would encourage anyone who's watching, use that time that we have with one another, use it to have some meaning and purpose. Yes, we have seen countless people step forward. We see folks coming up with new and creative ways to show care and compassion for one another. I'm as I guess the senior member of the three of us, I'll act as the old wise man and just offer that we ought to find new ways to be kind to one another. If nothing else, be kind to one another. Take those moments you have and value them, use them, and cherish them. There is a lot to worry about. There really is, and there are resources we hope that will be there to help. But at the end of the day, we have each other to rely on, and we have to find some way to virtually, metaphorically, or at some point soon, physically lean on one another.
And I think one other thing just on that, Mark and Pat and I have said this is not going to be over tomorrow. There's going to be long-term impacts. But there's people that are really on the front lines right now that need help. Nurses, firefighters, cops, EMS. If you live next to one of them, or if you know they need help, you want to mow their lawn. Do little acts of kindness that can make a difference in people's lives. That is the people that are really, we had our supermarkets closed on Sunday. We had supermarkets that's never closed before. They're even open on Christmas, closed on Sunday because they've been working their employees so much. So there's a lot of unsung heroes. We talked about daycare centers that aren't allowed to close. People keep asking us, why do they have to stay open? They have to stay open to care for first responders and essential workers, children. So if everybody out there, I haven't had somebody that say, I'm sitting home, I don't need to do anything, I'm enjoying this. Everybody's asked how they can help in some way. And I would just encourage the people of our counties and our community to continue to do that and make those differences, because those little things mean a lot to people that haven't got a chance to have a rest or hadn't taken a deep breath and are dealing with people that are dying right now that can't have their family members by their side. That's a powerful thing going on right now, where nobody can be by that loved one's side, but maybe that healthcare worker or that hospital, nurse or doctor. And that's a lot of weight on them as well. So if you can make a difference in their lives by giving them a little bit of a break, we appreciate it. And thank you for this opportunity, Jonathan.
Thanks, Steve. Look, 5 or 10 years from now, our children and our grandchildren will ask, what was the great pandemic of 2020 like, and what did you do? Our ability to answer that question comes now. Whether you are the heroes on the front line, the entire healthcare community, or the people working to keep us all fed, or you're doing your part to flatten the curve and stop the spread of the virus by staying home, we can all be heroes to our children and grandchildren when this story is written. I want to thank Marcus, Steve, Pat. As always, I think the world of you guys, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. And this is Jonathan Drapkin wishing that all of you stay healthy, help someone you know, as the county executive said, and remain positive. We will get through this.